Welcome to Old School Sundays. I'm your host, Odell. Let's get into some history. The night was supposed to change everything. April 4th, 1962. The first pick in the NFL draft. The Washington Football Club had the rights, and when the name Ernie Davis echoed through the ballroom, history was made. The first black player ever drafted number one overall, a moment that should have been immortalized in gold. But behind the applause was tension. Washington was the last team in the league still segregated, forced by the government to integrate or lose its stadium lease. Their owner, George Preston Marshall, had fought for years to keep black players out of his roster. Now, he was being told to draft one. Ernie Davis didn't smile for long. Before he ever put on a Washington jersey, he was traded to the Cleveland Browns. A business move, they said. But everyone knew what it really was, a way to make Marshall's problem disappear. Cleveland was supposed to be a fresh start, the chance to line up next to his idol, Jim Brown, and become the most unstoppable backfield the game had ever seen. But fate had other plans, because while Ernie Davis broke through one wall, another was waiting, one not built from hatred, but from tragedy. What happened next would turn the NFL's brightest future into its most heartbreaking what if. It was supposed to be a dream come true. After carrying Syracuse on his back and becoming the first black player to win the Heisman Trophy, Ernie Davis was ready to bring that same glory to the pros. The 1962 NFL Draft made it official. The Washington Football Club selected him first overall, the highest honor any player could receive. But the celebration didn't last long. Behind the scenes, Washington's owner George Preston Marshall was furious. He hadn't wanted to draft Ernie at all. Marshall had openly refused to sign black players for years, the last holdout in a league already moving toward integration. The US government had to threaten to revoke the team's stadium lease just to force his hand. So, the moment Ernie was drafted, the phone line started buzzing. Washington traded him within days to the Cleveland Browns, claiming it was business, but everyone knew the truth. The trade wasn't about strategy, it was about race. Marshall couldn't stomach seeing a black star in his uniform, especially not one wearing the spotlight of being number one overall. Cleveland welcomed him, at least on paper. Paul Brown called him the perfect complement to Jim Brown, and the idea of the two lining up together felt mythical. Power and speed, side by side. But Ernie knew what the trade meant. It was a reminder that no matter how great he became, the system could always move him like a pawn. Still, he smiled. He trained harder. He told reporters, I just want to play. What he didn't know was that fate, not football, would decide his future next. Summer 1962, Cleveland. The city buzzed with anticipation. Ernie Davis had finally arrived. The press called him the next Jim Brown, and teammates spoke about him with awe. At training camp, he was smooth, powerful, precise, the kind of runner who didn't just hit holes, he glided through them. But during one scrimmage, he felt something different, not pain, more like weakness. His legs felt heavy, his body didn't recover. Coaches thought it was exhaustion. Trainers blamed dehydration, but the truth was far darker. After a routine physical, doctors found abnormal white blood cell counts. They called him back for tests, then more tests. Finally, the words no 22-year-old athlete could ever prepare for: leukemia. The league didn't know what to do. The Browns front office was quiet, reporters confused. The fans who had waited to see Ernie Davis and Jim Brown together would never get the chance. Cleveland released a statement: Ernie Davis will not play this season due to a blood condition. They didn't say he was dying. Yet, through it all, Ernie refused to show fear. He kept practicing in secret, working out when his body allowed. When asked how he was doing, he said, I feel fine. Behind the calm smile was a man who understood what was being taken from him. Not just a career, but a legacy that had barely begun. Still, he told his coach, don't take me off the roster. I want to earn my spot. And for a while, it looked like he might beat it. But in a time when the world barely accepted him alive, it wasn't ready to mourn him as a hero. The next chapter of his story wasn't about football anymore. It was about grace, race, and how America mourns its pioneers. When word spread that Ernie Davis had leukemia, the nation's reaction split in two. On the surface, The media turned him into a symbol of courage, the handsome, humble young man who had broken barriers and was now fighting for his life. But beneath the headlines, the same country that had once hesitated to celebrate a Black Heisman winner now used his suffering as safe inspiration. They loved him because he was dying, not because he lived boldly. Just months earlier, hotels had refused him entry after bowl games. Restaurants had made him eat outside or in the kitchen. At the Cotton Bowl in 1960, after leading Syracuse to victory, he was denied a seat at the banquet in his own honor. The room that applauded his touchdowns wouldn't let him sit at the table. And now, those same papers called him America's hero. Still, Ernie carried himself with quiet grace. He never lashed out. He never refused to let bitterness define his final years. When President John F. Kennedy heard about his story, he invited Ernie to the White House. The photo of the two men shaking hands, one young and dying, the other powerful and symbolic, captured a moment bigger than football. Kennedy told him, "You've already made your country proud." But that pride came with hypocrisy. The same America that honored him in death had never let him fully belong in life. Black athletes across the league saw it for what it was: progress with a price tag. Ernie Davis wasn't just fighting cancer, he was fighting the weight of being the acceptable symbol, admired from a distance, never fully embraced. And as his condition worsened, his courage only grew because he knew the world was watching. By the fall of 1962, the Cleveland Browns were preparing for a season that would never include Ernie Davis on the field. His name still sat on the roster. His jersey, number 45, still hung in the locker room beside Jim Brown's. But the man himself was fighting a different battle, not in a stadium, but in a hospital bed. Teammates visited between games, some cried, some prayed. Jim Brown, the fiercest player in football, called Ernie the only man I ever envied. He told reporters Ernie had everything it took to be great: intelligence, power, and the kind of quiet confidence you can't coach. The Browns wanted him to lead out the tunnel for the season opener, even if he couldn't play, but he declined. He didn't want pity, he said. "I'll walk out when I can earn it." Doctors tried every treatment available, but the disease spread faster than the medicine could keep up. Still, Ernie wrote letters to his teammates. One read, "Some people say I've been unlucky, but I don't feel that way. I've lived a full life, even if it ends today." The Browns dedicated the season to him. They taped his number to their helmets. Every win felt like a prayer, every touchdown a message. "We're still fighting with you." But Ernie never played a single down. In May of 1963, the Browns quietly announced that he was losing his battle. The following year, they retired his number forever, a number that had never touched the grass in a professional game. He was gone before he turned 24. The NFL had lost its next superstar, but what it truly lost was innocence. The reminder that sometimes history's brightest lights burn out before the world is ready to see them shine. After Ernie Davis's death in 1963, the sports world went silent. There were no massive tributes, no national day of mourning, just a few paragraphs in the newspaper, a quiet funeral in Elmira, New York, and an obituary that felt too small for the size of his legacy. The NFL moved on, but for Black athletes across the country, something sacred had been lost. Ernie wasn't just supposed to play, he was supposed to change everything. He was proof that a Black man could not only lead, but inspire without angering the establishment, and that scared people. His story became one the league didn't quite know how to tell. It didn't fit the clean narrative of football conquers all, because Ernie's tragedy wasn't just leukemia, it was the weight of being a symbol in a segregated sport that wanted his talent but not his truth. For years, his name lived mostly in whispers: a small plaque here, a brief mention there. The first Black Heisman winner ever, overshadowed by the stars who came after. It took decades for people to realize that Ernie's story wasn't just football history, it was American history. Every Black player who came after him, from Gale Sayers to Walter Payton to today's superstars, walked a little farther down the road he helped pave. And in Syracuse, the number 44 became legend. Jim Brown wore it first. Ernie Davis made it eternal. Still, the NFL rarely spoke his name. Maybe because his story reminded them of a truth the league tried to bury. that even heroes can be traded, silenced, and forgotten. But like I always say, history has a way of whispering back. And for those who remember, Ernie's voice still echoes in every rookie who dreams of something bigger than the game itself. More than 60 years later, Ernie Davis's story still feels unfinished. You can watch a modern NFL game, see the diversity on the field, the billion-dollar TV deals, the superstar endorsements, and forget that once upon a time, one man had to carry all of that possibility on his shoulders alone. Ernie Davis never played a single professional down, yet his name is woven into every player who did. He made it possible for a black athlete to be seen more as than a body built for collision. He represented grace under pressure, dignity in a divided America, and a kind of leadership that the league didn't know how to measure. When people look back, they often ask, how good would he have been? The real question is, how different would the league have been if he had lived? Because Ernie Davis wasn't just a player, he was a turning point. The NFL's loss was America's lesson that progress often arrives in pain, and the heroes who open the doors rarely get to walk through them. His number 44 still hangs in Syracuse, his number 45 is retired in Cleveland. And even though the world forgot to celebrate him, his story endures in every player who defies the odds, every moment the crowd cheers for a game that was once closed to men like him. He may have been taken before his time, but his purpose outlived him. Ernie Davis didn't just change football, he reminded the world that courage doesn't always wear a helmet. The lights at Cleveland Municipal Stadium have long since dimmed. The roar of the crowd, the crack of the shoulder pads, the echoes of what could have been, all gone. But somewhere in that silence, we always can still feel it. The heartbeat of a man who changed football without ever playing it down. Ernie Davis's locker stayed untouched for years. His uniform never stained by mud, his cleats never scuffed by turf. To some, that's a tragedy, but to those who understand, it's something greater, a memorial to potential itself. He was the bridge between eras, between Jim Brown's fury and the quiet confidence of players who came next. Would the modern NFL even exist without Ernie Davis? Would the league have learned to see black athletes as leaders, not just laborers? If not for the grace he showed in the face of injustice? Maybe not. Because every generation of players from Walter Payton to Barry Sanders to Lamar Jackson owes a silent debt to the young man who never got his first snap. Ernie Davis didn't lose to cancer, he conquered something bigger: hate, doubt, and the limits of his time. Stick around because in the next few videos, we'll be diving deeper into his statistics to show you how good of a player he was. This is Old School Sundays, where the legends who built the game finally get their stories told. If you remember this era or lived through the glory days, hit subscribe. Because in this game, history never really dies, it just waits for someone brave enough to tell it.